everybody. Before we start today's episode, I want to take a moment to tell you about something that has become a daily part of my own practice. Young You Organics White Sage Smudge Spray. Now, if you're like me and appreciate the benefits of energy cleansing but want a smoke-free alternative, this spray is perfect for you. It's made with white sage, clary sage, palo santo, rosemary, and lemongrass essential oils. It has added sea salt and blue apatite crystals, and it offers all the powerful cleansing properties and benefits of traditional smudging without the need for burning sage. It's quick, it's easy, it's portable, and it smells really good. Whether you're at home, in the car, or at work, this spray can help you clear out negative energy, reset your space, and create a calm and peaceful environment. I personally love using it all the time, and especially before recording these episodes to create a centered and grounded environment and condition in my body. So if you want to enhance your spiritual practice in a clean and convenient way, check out Young You Organics White Sage Smudge Spray on Amazon, and we will provide a link in the description for you to check this out. All right, let's get started on today's conversation. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Evolving the Conversation. I am Melissa here with Nick, and today we have an episode where we read the same book, The Return of the Prodigal Son by Henri Nouwen, and we're going to talk about it together. This was Nick's idea. We did it a while ago on Siddhartha, and then I remembered about this book. So this is the second time I read it, and the first
Maybe
time
like
Nick
the
read
book
it.
is my not the book wasn't my idea. The book was your idea.
No, yeah, I said the book, to read a book together and talk about it
Ah,
was your idea. And so that's why we did the Siddhartha, and then I remembered about this book, which
yeah,
I
good
think
call
is
on this book.
amazing. Yeah, I love
Yeah,
this book.
very good.
I
I
think it's like
really
my favorite book. Yeah,
very good book
Henry,
indeed.
wait, I'm sorry, what did you say? I interrupted
I
you.
said very good book indeed. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I really enjoy Henry Nouwen. I'm going to read his about the author in the back. I think he's a fantastic spiritual teacher. He's very like simple and he's very easy to understand. Is not complex at all. And I also love what I love about him is that he's very like he's very forthcoming and admits a lot to his like all his failings and what he thinks is wrong with himself. So I love that.
Yeah, I
He's
like that too.
relatable.
It's relatable. It's important to, I guess, confess your shortcomings.
Yeah. Oh, and this honestly the book is like super easy to read too.
Mm.
So about the author, it says Henry Nouwen was born in the Netherlands and where he was ordained to the priesthood. He taught at the University of Notre Dame, Yale Divinity School, and Harvard Divinity School. And some of his other written works include The Creative Ministry, The Wounded Healer, Reaching Out, In the Name of Jesus, and Beyond the Mirror. And in 1986, he became the pastor of Les Arcs Daybreak community in Toronto, Canada. And I think that's a community that he works. I think he's actually dead, but I think it's a community of people that he worked with or works. I don't know. I have to look that up. That all have like mental disabilities, mental and physical disabilities. So he talks about that career in the book a little bit.
Yeah, cool dude. I really enjoyed his work and getting to read about how he relates this story to his life and beyond it too, just in like his own teachings and words of wisdom about what this parable is. And so I'm just gonna read the parable, and it's called The Story of the Two Sons and Their Father. And this was a parable by Jesus Christ, who spoke this to his students and followers. And it says, there was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, let me have the share of the estate that will come to me." So the father divided the property between them. A few days later, the younger son got together everything he had and left for a distant country where he squandered his money on a life of debauchery. When he had spent it all, that country experienced a severe famine, and now he began to feel the pinch, so he hired himself out to one of the local inhabitants who put him on his farm to feed the pigs. And he would willingly have filled himself with the husks the pigs were eating, but no one would let him have them. Then he came to his senses and said, how many of my father's hired men have all the food they want and more, and here I am dying of hunger. I will leave this place and go to my father's and say, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired men. So he left the place and went back to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with pity. He ran to the boy, clasped him in his arms, and kissed him. Then his son said, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the calf we have been fattening and kill it. We will celebrate by having a feast because this son of mine was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is found, and they began to celebrate. Now the elder son was out in the field, and on his way back, as he drew near the house, he could hear music and dancing. Calling one of the servants, he asked what it was all about. The servant told him, your brother has come home, and your father has killed the calf we had been fattening, but because he has got him back safe and sound. He was angry and then refused to go in, and his father came out and began to urge him to come in. But he retorted to his father, all these years I have slaved for you and never once disobeyed any orders of yours. Yet you never offered me so much as a kid for me to celebrate with my friends. But for this son of yours, when he comes back after swallowing up your property, he and his loose women, you kill the calf we had been fattening. The father said, my son, you are always with me, and all I have is yours. But it was only right we should celebrate and rejoice because your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is found.
So that is the parable or the story that Jesus told. And then there's also a painting that the artist Rembrandt made or created based on the parable. And so the book is about Henri Nouwen's exploration of really the painting. He became kind of like obsessed with it, and he was able to get access to go see the Rembrandt version, and he was able to like sit with it for a long time in private. And so then the book is his exploration of the painting, the parable, and his experience as both sons and the father.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful painting too, and I plan to post it on the thumbnail. But if for some reason that doesn't happen, all you could do is Google it to check out this picture. I recommend it because with the story, it just sort of goes along with the picture and the parable, like you said. In the introduction, it's called The Younger Son, the Elder Son, and the Father. And this is a quote from this passage of the book. And it states, whether you are the younger son or the elder son, you have to realize that you are being called to become the father. And I think that'll be important for later on towards the end of the book when the book talks about the father in this story. And it also states that we need to become someone who can claim the authority of true compassion, which in the parable is the father who has true compassion for both of his sons in their suffering.
Agreed. So, what I really learned from this book is about the love that God has for his creations.
What did you learn specifically?
Really, just how, well, I think I probably had already learned this somewhere, that God just loves us and is really with us, whether or not we we think that God is with us, or if we turn away from God, or if we live a life without thinking about God or contemplating God, that God is still there with us no matter what, kind of just waiting for us to acknowledge and turn towards God.
Love that. Yeah, we'll get into it later in the book, but exactly that of just allowing yourself to be accepted and loved by God just the way you are.
Yeah, I think that's really exemplified in the story of the son that goes away. He goes looking for life. Like, what can I find? What adventures are there?
Yeah, I mean, it's so natural,
Like, what
right?
does life have to offer me?
Yeah, yeah. Beyond, the comfort of his home and his loving father and the business and all of it, I think it's pretty common of a human experience to like want to know what more is out there. I think in this parable, it's more of a metaphor of wanting there to be more to God's love than just pure unconditional acceptance and compassion, and wanting to achieve accomplishments for these things, for love, etc.
I don't know if it's that you necessarily want more than that, but I think we have the false idea that like that stuff, accomplishments and traveling and enjoying life. Of course, that stuff is amazing, but I feel like we have the false idea, or I had the false idea, perhaps that when I go and do those things, then I will be fulfilled. Like if I do this stuff, then versus, oh no, I'm already like okay the way I am. God will, I have God's love no matter what, and like that's the actual thing that is like really nutritious and sustains us versus like the fleeting experiences and the accomplishments and all the things that we could do in this like material world. Do, accomplish, be. Like none of that matters ultimately.
No, I don't think ultimately, in the eyes of true unconditional love of God, none of that really does matter. Um, and it leads me to think of when we pursue these things of like asking the question, why is it that I am pursuing this thing in the first place? Like, is it to have a fun experience or is it to like truly love myself? And I mean, perhaps the latter is based in just sort of delusion and illusion. Like, oh, if I go have this experience, if I do this thing, well, then I could love myself. If I accomplish this goal, then I could love myself. When in the book it talks about becoming the father in, having real unconditional love, and I would say, directing that towards yourself and opening up and accepting also the true unconditional love of God is that alignment with yourself and divinity, or as they put it in, this parable, the Son and the Father.
I'm not sure what point you were making there.
Isn't necessarily, I don't know if it was a point, but it was the sense of asking yourself why you want to do something
Mm.
as opposed to like saying like, oh, like don't seek out these external experiences, but like instead of like not seeking it out, just like asking yourself, why are you seeking out these external experiences? If it's for loving yourself, these external experiences won't bring you that, no matter what it really is. Um,
Mm.
was
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there is like a, yeah, I think it's more, I agree with what you're saying. The fact that we have to understand the really like the true, maybe like the desire that we have versus the manufactured or put in us or like false beliefs that if we accomplish stuff that then we'll get love. Like we ultimately have to have that love as a foundation. Like it doesn't come from the things that we do and the things that we accomplish and who we are and what we achieve. It's just, it's there for us as like because we're born. But I also do think that, um, I don't know, for me, thinking about, I started not loving myself and then, um, I do take it as like a source of my own love when I look at the things that I have not necessarily able to accomplish, but like who I am, you know. So I think on one hand, yeah, I think we have to, be honest with ourselves about why we're pursuing the things we're pursuing and why we want the things we want, because there's a lot of conditioning and false beliefs about, achieving will get us somewhere or love or more money will get us whatever. And also I could, rest in the knowing that I'm loved no matter what. But then also like, I don't know, not that my love for myself is conditional, but I do feel like the more I recognize the things in my life that, again, maybe it's not things I'm accomplishing, but like things I'm becoming, I do have like more and more like love and like kind of like this proudness of myself.
My thoughts are open-ended questions of pinpointing where it is that I'm coming from. Am I doing this because I love myself? Okay, I'm doing this because I love myself. Am I doing this because I want to find love for myself?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're
It's
saying.
two different impetuses.
Yeah, no, yeah, and that's what I was saying. Like, I agree with that. We have to ask ourselves, like, why we're doing this thing. Where are we coming from? But then I was also saying that on one hand, on the other hand, I do have some sort of like, I don't know what that word is. I don't know if it's love or just, looking back on my life and being able to see, wow, you really have, it's not things I've accomplished. It's like ways in which like I've become, I'm like, oh, wow, like I really love you as a person for like the stuff that you were able to like transform and transmute.
I think it leads to a weird sort of perhaps duality where it's like thinking, oh, if I want to find love for myself, then that's somehow starting in a place of not loving myself, where I don't think it always has to be like that. Perhaps, you could want to find deeper love for yourself and be able to then share that with other people. There's nothing wrong with either pursuit.
Oh, I didn't say there was. I'm just
I
explaining how
know.
I recognize both things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's both. It can be both. This brings us to the second chapter where the younger son leaves, and um, he asked the father for his cut of the estate money, and he left. And yeah, it was only when he had the courage to. This is a quote from the book. Only when I have the courage to explore the depths of what it means to leave home, can I come to a true understanding of the return. I find that really interesting as a passage in the book of understanding of really seeing um, really seeing things that aren't based in love Like I'm sure I've experienced people like this that really aren't based in love and compassion, and then really looking at the people who are in your life that really are and go, oh, okay, now I truly do understand that. And and in the book where, he figures out these things, although it's probably an act out of desperation of this son to return home, you know, we know that he finds this unconditional love in his father anyway. And there's another passage I would like to read too. It says, this is this is a passage called Deaf to the Voice of Love, and it says, leaving home means ignoring the truth that God has fashioned me and secreted, molded me in the depths of the earth, and knitted me together in my mother's womb. Leaving home is living as though I do not yet have a home and must look far and wider. And that's all a metaphor of the thinking that is based in separation of God's love.
Can you read that again?
Sure. Deaf to the voice of love is the specific part of the passage. Leaving home means ignoring the truth that God has fashioned me and secreted, molded me in the depths of the earth, and knitted me together in my mother's womb. Leaving home is living as though I do not yet have a home and must look far and wider.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I mean, both sons are really are an example of the, false beliefs that we have about being separate from God. I mean, that's why there's a whole story to begin with. That's why there's the parable in the first place, partly. It's because we have to recognize that we're not separate from God.
Yeah, yeah, and just accepting, I mean, as this book would say, the Father's love. But yeah, it's just really about accepting God's love as you don't have to do anything for my love. I just love you. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. Sometimes the simple things are hard to accept.
Yeah.
Humans have made life pretty complex.
Yeah, we have. We definitely have. I think, all the complexity leads to this uh false sense of really what love is. Like, oh, I love you if, or I'll help you if.
Yeah. Well, that's why we have God, because humans, we're not expected to be God. And that's why we have God, because we don't have we have all of God's love to lean on, but we're not God. We're not this like all loving, all I do is just outpour my love from you, right? We have like wants and needs and desires and likes and dislikes and, you know, all the complexities of living with other people with their likes and dislikes and personalities and coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms and all of it.
Yeah. And so this part of the book is about just the younger son, and the author talks about when the younger son returns, and um, he says to the father, um, excuse me, he says, this is what the author says: the father, I run away from the place where God dwells, the less I am able to hear the voice that calls me the beloved. And the less I hear that voice, the more entangled I become in the manipulation and the power games of the world. And in my interpretation of that, it is the separating from love that causes the mind to believe that power in and of itself is the ultimate goal, but the pursuit of power alone is a shallow game, and the only real powers that help are based in love and giving without expecting anything in return. Yet, we live in a world of transactions, and so, you know, I think, part of the discipline of gratitude is, finding the love even in that, or love for it, not meaning like liking it, but, like in the world of transactions, transactions are transactions, but help is help. And there's a difference between like, I'm just going to help you, not expect anything in return, to, oh, I'm helping you, so you gotta help me do this. And those are really sort of just games we play.
Yeah, I found it interesting. The first time I read the book, I really related to the first son, the one who is like looking for God or looking for something else, only to like realize, oh wait, God was in the place I was that entire time where I went off to do something else. And then only found it on the return. So I really related to that. And then the first time I read it. And then the second time I read the book, I really related to the second son. Which one did you relate to? Or
In
did you relate
reading
to
the
both of
book,
them?
I was contemplating on both how I relate to both of them and looking in my life where I've had the tendencies of the younger son and the older son. And I've found both of uh, those behaviors that are themes in this book to also be similar in myself and my life and my past. And well, I hope not my future.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, I don't know, I'm sure everyone probably at some point relates to both of them. It's kind of impossible to not. So the second son, the one who doesn't leave, is like resentful, and it's hard for him to enjoy the party because he feels like he's not getting what he deserves. Like he's always been obedient and he's, stayed by the father and done the work and done everything he was supposed to do. But yet, like, where's his party? Where's his celebration? And so the dad says, everything I have is yours.
Yeah, with the elder son, as you stated, his his struggles that he's working through is jealousy and resentment. And this is a passage from the book, and it says, once the self-rejecting complaint has formed in us, we lose our spontaneity to the extent that even joy can no longer evoke joy in us, and joy and resentment cannot coexist. And um, the author states the lighting of the picture on the elder son's face is a depiction that he too is called forth to the light and to release negativities and to join his father and brother in celebration and in joy together. And he also writes, what I do know with unwavering certainty is the heart of the Father, it's the heart of limitless mercy. And he even speaks that to the elder son. And in the parable, we never really get a conclusion of the elder son, and it's really just an open question. And this is another quote from the author where he says, in the house of my father, there are many places to live. Jesus says each child of God has their own unique place, all of them places of God. I have to let go of all comparison, all rivalry and competition to surrender to God's love. And in his jealousy, the older son can see the father giving more attention to the brother, like we were talking about, where he squandered the family's wealth. And touching upon how we don't really quite get that conclusion of this elder son, and it's open-ended questions of how will the elder son look when he is free of his complaints and resentments and jealousy. And in the parable, yep, we're just not told about it. And so it leaves it open to our own imagination and interpretations of like what can the elder son in us really look like when we really let go of the complaints and the resentments and the jealousies that are part of this human condition.
Yeah, and that's the part where I feel like Henry Nouwen really was like, I relate to this. Like, I'm resentful. I'm jealous. And I'm like, yeah, me too.
Yeah, yeah,
I've
feel it.
definitely seen in ceremony before, like, the only reason you're not at the party is because, like, you don't want to go. And I'm like, oh, God, that's a really hard one to. I felt like for me this time around, that one was harder to confront, or I don't know, it felt more confronting, like I said, reading it this time than it felt the second time.
Um, in my experience of dealing with those jealousies in ceremony, um, it just is like really resonating with me talking about this book, and also giving me clarity on sort of like the inner workings of my own psyche of thinking, oh, like this person's doing so much better than me, they're gonna get more love and acceptance from me. And it's all really prideful thinking, and it's all based in those tendencies of the older sons of like jealousy and resentment, right? It's like everyone's there at the party having fun, and I'm being all their poopy pants because I think that I need to accomplish something in order to be loved. And it's really just not the case.
Yeah. It reminds me of something that I saw when I was working through some like jealousy, where it's just a totally incorrect thought. Like you're comparing a tiny little bit of time to a tiny little bit of time, and it doesn't equal at all. It's like you're comparing apples to oranges, but yet we like look at a person and, take this little bit of their story that we're totally imagining and comparing it to us, and it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, that doesn't necessarily stop it from happening, but that knowing was certainly like, oh, okay, I have to recognize that my mind does this thing that's just like really incorrect. But I think ultimately it's that, we're all, no matter what, worthy of God's love, and God's going to give it to us no matter what we do, right? It's just a matter of, can we turn towards that, and can we allow for that? Can we allow for that we're loved even though, right, we haven't done that thing or gotten that thing, or, followed the dream that we had, or whatever it is.
I want to touch upon something about the younger son. And in the book, the author um, gives us this passage and says, I am not sure anymore I have a safe home, and I observe other people who seem to be better off than I am, paraphrasing there. Um, I wonder how I can get to where they are. I try hard to please, to achieve success, to be recognized. When I fail, I feel jealous or resentful to others. When I succeed, I worry that others will be jealous or resentful of me. I become suspicious or defensive and increasingly afraid that I won't get what I desire or lose what I already have. I feel victimized by my surroundings and distrustful of what others are doing or saying. Always on my guard, I lose my inner freedom and start dividing the world into those that are for me and those that are against me, and I wonder if anyone really cares. He then goes to say that the choice of my sonship, which is an interesting word. I kind of want to rephrase that, but I'll do it at the end. The choice of my sonship, however, is not an easy one. The dark voices of my surrounding world try to persuade me that I am not good and that I can only become good by earning my goodness through um, walking up the ladder of success. These voices lead me quickly to forget the voice that calls me my son, the beloved, reminding me of my being loved independently of any acclaim or accomplishment. And so, in my interpretation of what he's talking about here, is just really claiming ownership, or really saying, like, it's my choice to accept God's love and its unconditionalness, no matter what it is that I do, in the face of a society that says you are worth based on what you achieve.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, we live in a pretty fucked up society, huh?
I mean, everyone's doing the best they can. This
So,
is what it is for now.
it is what it is. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's like, I don't want to like just limit it to like, oh, it's just like modern society. I mean, Jesus was talking about all these things like however many thousands of years ago, so like this shit ain't anything new.
Yeah, right? I mean, he had to tell this story for a reason,
Yeah.
or chose to tell this story for a reason. I mean, I think that's always the message, right? That, like, if we accept God and accept God's love now, like, that's that's what we're all, I don't know, that's what we're all, that's the image that we have of, like, when we die, we go to heaven and we're with God. No, oh, it could actually be right here, right now, if we are just accepting of the fact that we're not separate from God, and that God not only willing to love us, but like wants to, right? Like that's what God wants to do. Like it's, in the story how this, I didn't realize this in the story the last time either, how God is almost like saddened by the fact that we're turned away from, and I'm saying him, I don't necessarily think it's a him, but it's just out of habit, that we're turned away from him. Like it's sad. It's like it's almost like we're dead to him because we're not accepting of his love. Right? Like he said in the book, they're saying how the father thought the son was dead. He returned from the dead. And like,
I love that you mention what Jesus was talking about, and I often think that what Jesus was talking about with the kingdom of heaven, and you are the key to the kingdom of heaven, he means literally when we can all awaken, or when we awaken as an individual to the fact that truly God's love is in, through, and all around everyone and everything. And by recognizing that, that is the kingdom of heaven.
yeah. Yeah, I
Good
mean, I
one.
think that's what he was saying for sure.
Good one, Jesus. Hell yeah. Love that teaching. And
Yeah,
then eventually, so go ahead.
oh
Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say when we were talking about the older son, something that also stood out for me this time is how uh, Henry Nouwen talks about how gratitude is a discipline. I really like that because I do sometimes feel like I haven't felt like that recently, but I could remember times in the recent past where I'm like, I don't want to be fucking grateful for anything. Like nothing feels good right now. Like I don't want to look for the positive things, but it's a discipline, and that's one of the ways that we can help to, I don't know if the word is resolve our jealousy and our resentments, is by focusing on what is truly in front of us.
Yeah. Um, in my experience, this book has been really helpful in offering to look at gratitude as a practice too, and it's been helping me along through some personal struggles that I've been going with or that I've just been suffering from recently, both self-inflicted and not self-inflicted. and and having gratitude as being that balancing tool to like really look at the things in my life in which I can truly find joy in, even though I don't know necessarily if like I can find joy in everything. We might get to it a little bit later on, but just worth mentioning, um, that this author, he talks about how the unconditional love of the Father in this, or the unconditional love of God, is about grief and about forgiveness. And what's that third one? Sorry, there's a third one here. It's in the book somewhere. Grief, forgiveness. Uh, hold on, I really want to get this one because it was really important. Generosity.
Mm.
So grief, forgiveness, and generosity. Um, as I was reading that yesterday and reflecting on my life and just really looking at things that have happened that like I'm truly grieving over and forgiving and not acting pridefully, even though the wants are there. Like I definitely have the wants to act out of pride, but also an understanding that if I do, it's not going to bring me anything positive. So forgiving, and I like what a teacher had told me of forgiving isn't an act of being a good person, but just not carrying around other people's shit, which I think is kind of multifaceted, like, you know, of that. And yeah, and then being generous too. And then, with certain people, person that I've had a falling out with, and um, my life of just being cordial and not wanting to seek revenge for having had been made a fool and all of these things. It was really nice to read these things yesterday because it was like so on the spot of what I've been going through and how to positively handle it instead of living in just darkness and negativity and self-pity and everything else that would be described as negative.
Mm. That's good you have the resource. I wasn't particularly going through anything when I was reading the book, but it just felt like I was like being like hugged when I was reading it.
It's so fascinating how spirit is in the sense of during most of this book when I first started reading it, I wasn't really going through anything, but it was like I savored that last passage. You know, coincidence or synchronicity? I'm more inclined to think this one was a synchronicity and just say, oh, like I needed to read those things at that moment. Thank you,
Mm.
God. Pointing up should just be pointing like this. Thank you, God.
Could point in any direction, you'll still hit God.
Yep. Uh,
Yeah. So after the author kind of shares his reflections on what it means to live our life as the younger son and what it means to live our life as the older son. He talks about what he realized is the ultimate journey, not really to realize that we are either son, I guess it's like an intermediary step, but to realize that our actual role is to become the father
love
and
it.
to love as God loves.
Love it. Yeah. Um, in the chapters of the book of the Father, the author states his interpretation of the portrait of the Father is one of a divinely human figure that is both an old man of life and an infinite compassion and love. Kind of read that wrong, but like you know what I meant. He's like an old man, and he's also like this, like divinely compassionate person, and you see both aspects
It's
of.
that there's like the sternness and the softness. Well, it's everything, right? Like we're talking about God as being the mother and the father. It's not really just like the father, but since for whatever reason God's always associated with the father. Um, but it's both.
I have something written down about what you were just talking about understanding God as both the father and the mother. And this is a part in the book where the author talks about how God, as we were saying, is both the mother and the father, and is leading to the mystery, and this is the author's quote, that God is also infinite compassion that has linked herself for eternity of the life of her children and has freely chosen to become dependent on her creatures who she has gifted freedom. This choice causes her grief when they leave. This choice brings her gladness whenever they return, but her joy will not be complete until all who have received life from her have returned home and gathered together around the table prepared for them.
I can relate to that.
Arama.
Who wants your kid to grow up and be like, I'm leaving, never coming home again? I mean, on one hand, I'm like, okay, good. And then on the other hand, I'm like, oh, but I won't like be able to snuggle my babies anymore.
He also goes on to write in this book that here's a God I want to believe in, a father how from the beginning of creation has stretched out his arms in merciful blessings, never forcing himself on anyone, but always waiting, never letting his arms drop down in despair, but always hoping that his children will return so that he can speak words of love to them and lets his tired arms rest on their shoulders. His only desire is to bless.
It's
So
nice to have that kind of understanding of God versus like a God that's up there in heaven, like waiting to judge you for all the ways that you were wrong in your life.
yeah, right. It's funny how like it's ironic in a sense where we're reading a book about Christianity and like in the same religion, it's like they're giving the poison and the healing almost at the same time here.
Well, I mean, I think that was all planned, right? They needed people to come back to the church. So they decided to adopt the like doctrine of original sin. Oh, and then we could help you solve like your problems of sin.
Yeah, what a racket.
Yeah.
Fuck you, pay me.
Meanwhile, God loves you no matter what. I mean, and God has forgiveness. I don't necessarily think God needs forgiveness, but that's just how I interpret that. Because all
Yeah.
God does is just love, love, love.
Well, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying. Um, There's a passage of the book where the author writes, "The father does not even give his son a chance to apologize, but preempts his son's begging with spontaneous forgiveness and puts aside his pleas as completely irrelevant in the light of his own joy of his return."
Yeah, I mean, perhaps it's more, again, I think the forgiveness is, I think it's like a mortal thing. We just have to know sometimes like what we did was okay or could be repaired, or that, right, there's like a rupture and a repair. And that is what makes relationships stronger.
I tend to agree that forgiveness is just, yeah, a human being thing.
Yeah, I mean, I see why it's needed for sure, but I don't think that there is actually anything ever that God needs to forgive. And
My,
again, since God is just always this outpouring of love, like it never stops, even if you do the wrong thing or the bad thing.
I don't know. And now I'm thinking like perhaps it's all of it, right? Like God being uh, a being that truly knows everything about everyone, knows it couldn't have been any different in the first place, and loves you no matter what, but still offers that it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. I
No
mean, I
matter
guess
what.
that's our idea of forgiveness, right? Like being loved even though you fucked up.
Yeah, and I think really that's where the author talks, or what his ideas are of this is aligning yourself with that divine qualities of ascension, of forgiveness and unconditional love and compassion and giving that outwards as really aligning yourself with God and with the higher power.
Yeah, I think so.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, well, I bookmarked one page, but I can't remember why. But not the only, but one of the lines that stood out to me the most is, and I think I read this to you actually, but it is, now I wonder whether I have sufficiently realized that during all this time, God has been trying to find me, to know me, and to love me. And the question is not how am I to find God, but how am I to let myself be found by Him? The question is not how am I to know God, but how am I to let myself be known by God? And finally, the question is not how am I to love God, but how am I to let myself be loved by God?
Yeah, that passage on, I think it was 107 that you just read.
Yeah, 106.
Yeah, and it's a great passage. I think the author really, with those open-ended questions, conveys the meaning of yeah, not asking yourself those questions that ultimately drive you crazy, right? Like how do I find God? But more so like ask the question of how do I let myself be found? Like how do I really let myself be loved? And it's interesting where it goes like outward then inward of saying, "Oh, am I being unaccepted of God's love? Am I unaccepting of myself?" And gives you the questions to ask to really frame it in the mind of how do I let myself be known by God? And like you said, or how am I to let myself be loved by God's love?
Yeah, I think a lot of us probably carry like a lot of shame, a lot of feeling like or love is going to go away. And it can be really challenging to like, how do I, or maybe we received love that like didn't feel like love, almost like what you were talking about earlier. So I think a lot of us do have all those vectors going that way, as opposed to, emanating from in and then going out. But I think that's kind of what happens when you do turn those questions onto yourself. Like, how can I let God love me more? How can I receive?
I want to read a passage of the book, and it says, I don't have to wait until all is well, but I can celebrate every little hand of the kingdom that is at hand. This is a real discipline that requires choosing from the light even where there is much darkness to frighten me, choosing the truth even when I am surrounded by lies.
Yeah, choosing that there's God, even when you see all the stuff that doesn't look a lot like what we think God is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just tells me like the only thing right you could do is let yourself be loved and then just love like God. Or not even necessarily love like God, but I mean, I always just think of God as like just like the greatest teacher. Like fill me with your love so I could love better. Fill me with your patience so I could be more patient. almost like that mercy quality. I'm only like have mortal love. You have like the divine love.
I think we say that we only have mortal love, but perhaps we really do have, as this book would phrase, the love of the Father, or real divine love.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's really the only real love.
I mean, I think it's you have to it's I don't want it's not necessarily like work, but it's like practice. And then of course there are moments where you're like, oops. Gotta rewind that one. Gotta do that one differently next time.
Yeah,
I
I
think
feel
that's like the mortal, like, are you gonna walk through every single day and every single moment as like, "Ah, I wish."
I wish too. I think it would be important to read this passage because it is exactly what we're talking about. And this is right at the end of the book. But he says, isn't there a subtle pressure in both the church and society to remain a dependent child? Hasn't the church in the past stressed obedience in a fashion that made it hard to claim spiritual fatherhood? And hasn't our consumer society encouraged us to indulge in the childish self gratification? Which makes me think, like, perhaps if we didn't have all of that conditioning of do this and you'll get that, and then relate that to love and affection, and play all of these power games, with each other, that we wouldn't have to work at actually understanding really what it means to know what God's love is.
Mm. Yeah. I think for me, what that brought up was that a lot of us are living from a child self with unresolved emotional baggage that leads us to live from that place of kind of where it happened and when it happened and needing to meet those needs. But what we really have to do is like grow up and recognize that we got what we got. And it's not a case of you get what you get and don't be upset, but we did get what we got. And now, as adults, we could choose differently. We could make different choices. We could, choose to to use different resources and to have a different aim almost, and to really grow up and to recognize what that means. I mean, for me, I've been thinking about it a lot recently. It means to like, right, to be more honest, to be more patient, to be more compassionate, to be more loving, to just be more like, slowing down and allowing people to have their own, experience, and me being able to accept that, accept my own experiences, accept, all of the parts about me, and also, try my best to accept all the parts about everybody else.
I relate to that. And in my experience of what this author was talking about there, as far as like growing up, becoming like the spiritual father, the spiritual mother, um, yeah, it means becoming mature in the sense of what is really true, and really looking for what the truth is in all things. And like you said, accepting some things, and in my case, I'm working on accepting how certain people are the way that they are. Doesn't mean I have to like them, doesn't mean I got to be around them, but I think they're equally deserving of forgiveness um, and love as well. And yeah, it's still work. It's still work because, of all these societal programmings that I have been taught, that we've been discussing here, of like pride and, well, that's specifically what I'm going through currently, but all of these things. And Yeah, I mean, it leads me to think, like, what am I doing here with this experience? What is the meaning of this experience? And it really does seem to be about awakening to the truth about uh, what God really is.
Yeah, it's a worthy process.
Amen.
All right. Do you want to end there? Do you have more to say? Do you have more quotes to read us, Nick?
I got nothing.
Well, I really can't recommend this book highly enough. I think it's definitely the best, like, spiritual slash self-help book
Yes,
that
I
I've
agree.
ever read. It's so
I agree.
short, too.
It's very
It's
good.
very easy to read. And if you're looking to learn about God, it's like 135 pages or so. If you're looking to learn about God or to know God better, know God's love, to be loved more, to be more loving, then give it a read. I gave it a 10.
Yep, 10 out of 10. And actually, you know what I could do? I could put the link in the description for this book on Amazon, or get it from your local library. Support them
Hmm.
too.
That's
Either
what I
one is
did.
good.
I think the person who read the book before me was like wearing perfume or something because it was kind of annoying that every time I opened the book, it was very like, maybe this is God trying to get my attention. I'm like, God, I hope you wear better cologne next time. Don't you know that stuff could kill you?
Uh, that's funny.
All
Um,
right.
well, everyone, thank you for listening in. If you have any thoughts that you would like to share, leave it in the comments. If you are not subscribed, please give us a subscribe. And we plan on doing more uh, podcasts in the future and maybe another book episode. I don't know what book, but yeah, anyway, stay tuned.
All right. Bye, everybody.